Ma'am, first-class passengers usually understand the difference between premium boarding and economy lines. The words sliced cleanly through the crowded terminal, sharp enough to make nearby travelers glance up from their phones and coffee cups. Brittany Cole stood beneath the glowing gate display at Terminal B of Chicago International Airport, her Navy airline uniform pressed to perfection, her platinum badge gleaming beneath the overhead lights. At 34, Brittany carried herself with the rigid confidence of someone who believed authority and appearance were the same thing. And standing directly in front of her, one hand resting quietly on the handle of a small black carry-on suitcase, was Naomi Whitaker. Naomi blinked once, calm and unreadable. Around her, the polished marble floor reflected streams of moving passengers rushing toward departures, while rolling luggage echoed through the terminal like distant thunder. She wore a soft gray cardigan over a white shirt, dark jeans, and worn white sneakers that looked practical rather than fashionable. Her blonde hair was tied low at the back of her neck, and aside from a simple silver watch, there was nothing about her appearance that suggested wealth, status, or power. Which was exactly why Brittany had already decided she did not belong there. "My boarding pass is first class," Naomi said gently, extending her phone forward. Brittany barely looked at it before forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm sure there's some confusion, ma'am." A couple standing nearby exchanged amused glances. A businessman in a charcoal suit smirked into his espresso cup. Brittany lowered her voice just enough to sound insulting instead of loud. "First-class passengers are boarding through this lane only." Naomi's expression didn't change. "That's why I'm standing here." A hush of tension settled into the area. Brittany's jaw tightened. She had spent years climbing into a senior concierge position with the airline, learning how to identify what she called premium clientele within seconds. Designer luggage, luxury watches, tailored clothing, confident entitlement. Naomi had none of those things. To Brittany, she looked like someone who wandered into the wrong line and refused to admit it. "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much." Naomi shifted her suitcase slightly as passengers continued watching. She had arrived at the airport 40 minutes earlier after spending the morning in Denver reviewing contracts nobody outside the aviation industry even knew existed. In less than 4 hours, she was scheduled to attend a closed executive meeting in Chicago involving one of the largest airline restructuring deals in recent history. But none of the people surrounding her knew that. And Brittany Cole certainly didn't know she was speaking to the woman whose signature could determine the financial future of the very airline she worked for. "Ma'am," Brittany said again, this time more firmly, "if you'd step aside, we can avoid holding up our premium guests." The phrase premium guests hung in the air like perfume masking contempt. A few people laughed softly. Someone near the gate lifted a phone slightly higher, recording now. Naomi noticed. She noticed everything. The flicker of embarrassment on another employee's face. The teenager sitting near the window staring uncomfortably at the confrontation. The businessman pretending not to enjoy it. But most of all, she noticed Brittany's certainty. The absolute certainty that someone dressed simply could not possibly belong in a place associated with luxury. "I'm not holding up the line," Naomi replied quietly. "I'm waiting to board my flight." Brittany folded her arms. "Then perhaps you should wait in the correct section." The room went almost silent after that. Even the rolling wheels across the marble floor seemed quieter somehow. Brittany thought she was removing a problem from first class before takeoff. What she didn't realize was that she had just humiliated the most important passenger in the terminal. The silence near gate B12 lasted only a few seconds before the whispers started spreading through the terminal like ripples across still water. She is still standing there. Does she seriously think she belongs in first class? This is embarrassing. Naomi Whitaker heard every word, but her expression never changed. She simply stood beneath the soft white airport lights with one hand resting calmly on her suitcase, while Brittany Cole stared at her with growing irritation. The older businessman holding an espresso near the boarding lane shook his head with a smug smile. Across from him, A woman wearing oversized sunglasses leaned toward her friend and whispered loudly enough to be heard. People always try to sneak into premium boarding now. Brittany seemed encouraged by the reactions around her. Public approval gave her confidence. "Ma'am," she said again, her voice carrying farther this time. "I need you to step away from the boarding entrance until we resolve this issue." Naomi slowly looked toward the gate display showing Flight 782 to Chicago. Boarding for first class had officially begun 3 minutes earlier. Travelers with expensive luggage and tailored coats passed nearby, while stealing curious glances toward the growing scene. Naomi finally spoke. "There is no issue." Brittany forced a thin smile. "There clearly is." Then she extended her hand sharply. "Let me see your boarding pass again." Naomi handed over her phone without resistance. Brittany studied the screen this time, and for half a second confusion crossed her face. The ticket was legitimate. First class. Seat 2A. Fully paid. Priority access. Her eyes narrowed immediately afterward because the result only irritated her more. People like Naomi were not supposed to have tickets like that. Not in Brittany's world. "Where exactly did you purchase this ticket?" Brittany asked. Naomi blinked once. "Through the airline." A young man standing nearby laughed under his breath. Brittany ignored him and continued. "Do you have identification?" Naomi reached calmly into her cardigan pocket and handed over her driver's license. Brittany barely glanced at it before returning it. With obvious skepticism. "You know," Brittany said carefully, "there are consequences for using fraudulent tickets." A hush fell over the gate area after that sentence. Even several passengers who had not been paying attention before now turned fully toward them. Naomi's eyes remained steady. "My ticket is not fraudulent." "Then why?" Brittany asked. "Does this situation feel unusual?" The cruelty in the question was subtle enough to avoid sounding openly hostile, but everyone understood what she meant. Naomi did not look wealthy enough. That was the accusation hanging invisibly in the air. Nearby, a teenager wearing headphones lowered his phone and frowned. Another airline employee standing at the counter shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Brittany stepped slightly closer. First-class passengers are typically familiar with premium travel policies. Naomi answered softly. "I travel often." Brittany glanced deliberately at Naomi's sneakers. "Really?" The businessman with the espresso chuckled openly this time. Naomi could feel dozens of eyes studying her clothes, her suitcase, even the loose strands of blonde hair near her face. Most people would have walked away by now just to escape the humiliation. That was what Brittany expected. Embarrassment usually made people surrender quickly, but Naomi stayed exactly where she was. Calm, silent, unmoving, and somehow that unsettled Brittany more than anger ever could. "Ma'am," Brittany said firmly, "if you continue delaying boarding, I may need to involve airport security." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "For standing in line?" Brittany's expression hardened. "For creating disruption." The words echoed sharply against the marble floors. Several passengers exchanged uncomfortable looks because deep down, even they knew this had gone too far. Naomi slowly folded her hands over the handle of her suitcase. "I paid for my seat," she said quietly. "I intend to use it." Brittany stared at her for a moment, stunned by the composure in Naomi's voice. There was no panic, no pleading, no embarrassment anymore, just certainty. And for the first time since the confrontation began, Brittany felt something cold crawl into her stomach, because people who were lying usually became nervous under pressure. But Naomi Whitaker looked like someone patiently waiting for the truth to arrive. The tension around Gate B12 thickened like storm clouds gathering over still water. Brittany Cole crossed her arms tightly against her navy blazer, while Naomi Whitaker remained motionless beside the boarding lane, her calm presence somehow making the entire situation feel even more uncomfortable. The overhead speaker announced another departing flight somewhere across the terminal, but near the gate, almost nobody was paying attention anymore. Travelers slowed their steps as they passed. Conversations faded into whispers. Phones remained subtly raised. People sensed something unusual unfolding, though none of them yet understood what they were really watching. Brittany glanced toward the counter agent beside her, a younger employee named Ethan who looked increasingly uneasy. "Did you verify the ticket?" he asked quietly. Brittany answered without taking her eyes off Naomi. "I verified enough." Naomi heard the comment and slowly tilted her head. "You mean you verified that it is valid?" Brittany ignored her. Ma'am, this is your final opportunity to step aside voluntarily. Naomi's expression remained composed. And if I do not? Brittany inhaled slowly, clearly enjoying the authority behind her next words. Then security can determine whether you should remain in the boarding area. A low murmur spread through the nearby passengers. Even the businessman with the espresso lowered his cup slightly, surprised the situation had escalated this far. Naomi simply nodded once, as if mentally confirming something to herself. All right, she said softly. Then call them. Brittany blinked. That was not the response she expected. Most people backed down the moment security became involved. Embarrassment usually crushed confidence long before that point. But Naomi did not look embarrassed anymore. If anything, she looked patient. And patience unsettled Brittany far more than confrontation would have. Brittany immediately grabbed the radio clipped to her blazer. I need assistance at gate B12, she announced crisply. Possible boarding issue involving an uncooperative passenger. The phrase uncooperative passenger turned several heads instantly. Naomi noticed a woman sitting near the charging station glance at her with sudden suspicion. An older couple whispered quietly to one another. A teenage boy recording on his phone zoomed in slightly closer. The crowd was shifting. People always trusted authority first. That was the dangerous thing about public humiliation. Once someone in uniform suggested there was a problem, strangers filled in the blanks themselves. Brittany stood straighter now, energized by the growing attention. You should understand. She continued loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. Premium travel requires certain standards. Naomi finally looked directly at her. Standards of what? Brittany hesitated for half a second. Professionalism. Presentation. Conduct. Naomi's eyes remained steady. Not humanity. The question landed harder than anyone expected. Silence rippled briefly across the gate. Ethan looked down at the counter immediately. The woman near the charging station shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Even the businessman holding the espresso stopped smirking. But Brittany's pride had already carried her too far to retreat now. This is not personal, she said sharply. Then why does it feel personal? Naomi asked quietly. Brittany opened her mouth, then stopped. For the first time, she realized she did not actually have a good answer. Two airport security officers finally appeared at the end of the terminal, their dark uniforms cutting through the crowd as they approached the gate. The atmosphere changed instantly. Conversations died. Nearby passengers pretended not to stare while staring openly anyway. One officer, tall and middle-aged with silver hair at his temples, stepped forward calmly. What seems to be the issue? Brittany pointed subtly toward Naomi. This passenger is refusing to leave the premium boarding lane despite multiple requests. Naomi answered before the officer could speak again. I have a confirmed first-class ticket. The officer looked toward Brittany. Is the ticket valid? Brittany hesitated just long enough for the answer to become obvious. Technically, yes, she admitted carefully. The officer frowned slightly. Then why exactly are we involved? A hush fell over the terminal after that question. Brittany's confidence flickered for the first time all evening. And standing quietly beneath the bright airport lights, Naomi Whitaker finally reached into her carry-on bag, pulled out a slim silver laptop, and opened it calmly as if none of this chaos around her mattered at all. The moment Naomi Whitaker opened her silver laptop, the energy around gate B12 shifted in a way nobody could fully explain. The airport terminal still buzzed with distant announcements and rolling suitcases, but near the boarding lane, an uneasy stillness had settled over the crowd. People were no longer watching for entertainment alone. Something about Naomi's calmness had begun making them question everything they thought they understood about the situation. Brittany Cole noticed it too, and it irritated her deeply. She straightened the collar of her navy blazer and forced authority back into her posture. Ma'am, she said sharply, this is not the time to start working on your computer. Naomi looked up briefly. Actually, it is. Her fingers moved calmly across the keyboard while the glow from the screen reflected softly against her composed expression. One of the security officers glanced between the two women, visibly confused now. If the ticket is valid, he said carefully to Brittany, I am still unclear why this passenger cannot board. Brittany inhaled slowly. Because behavior matters, she replied. Premium passengers expect a certain environment. Naomi paused typing for just a second. Meaning what exactly? Brittany hesitated again. The problem with prejudice was that once someone asked for specifics, it suddenly sounded ugly out loud. Professional presentation, Brittany answered finally. Naomi nodded slightly, as if confirming something to herself. Then she returned to typing. Nearby passengers exchanged uncertain looks. The businessman with the espresso no longer seemed entertained. A younger woman sitting near the window quietly lowered her phone, her expression uncomfortable now. The social tide was beginning to turn, but Brittany could still feel her control slipping away only if she allowed it. So she doubled down instead. "You are causing unnecessary disruption," Brittany announced firmly. "Boarding has already been delayed." Naomi calmly closed her laptop halfway. "No," she said softly. "Your assumptions delayed boarding." The words landed like a crack through glass. Ethan, the younger gate employee, looked down immediately to hide the reaction on his face. Even one of the security officers shifted awkwardly. Brittany felt heat rising in her cheeks. Public authority depended on confidence, and Naomi was dismantling hers without ever raising her voice. "I think we are finished here," Brittany snapped. "Either board through economy when general seating opens, or leave the gate area entirely." Several nearby passengers looked stunned. One older woman whispered, "But she paid for first class." Brittany ignored her. Naomi slowly lifted her eyes toward the large windows overlooking the runway, where rain had begun streaking softly across the glass. Then she reached for her phone. No dramatic movements. No anger. No threats. Just one simple action. She opened her email. Her fingers typed calmly for several seconds before pressing send. Brittany crossed her arms again. "Who exactly are you emailing?" Naomi looked directly at her. "Someone who will care about this conversation." A hush spread instantly across the gate area. Brittany forced a laugh that sounded thinner than she intended. "You think complaining is going to intimidate me?" Naomi slid the phone back into her pocket. "No," she answered quietly. "I think truth eventually reaches the right people." The words unsettled Brittany more than she wanted to admit. Because despite everything, Naomi still did not look nervous. She looked patient, like someone waiting for a clock to reach a certain minute. Then suddenly, one of the airline supervisors behind the counter froze while staring at his monitor. His eyes widened slightly. "Brittany," he whispered carefully. "You need to see this." Brittany turned, annoyed. "What now?" The supervisor swallowed hard and angled the screen slightly. Toward her, Brittany's expression changed instantly. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something colder. Her posture stiffened as she read the flashing priority notification attached to Naomi Whitaker's boarding profile. Across the top of the internal airline system, highlighted in red, were 6 words that made the color drain from Brittany's face. Executive partner clearance. Direct board approval. The room went silent. Even the airport noise outside the gate suddenly felt far away. Brittany slowly looked back toward Naomi, whose calm eyes never left her. And in that terrifying quiet, Brittany Cole realized she may have just humiliated someone far more important than herself. For several long seconds, Brittany Cole could not breathe properly. The glowing red notification on the airline system remained frozen on the screen in front of her like a warning flare in the darkness. Executive partner clearance. Direct board approval. Internal priority tier 1. Brittany had worked for the airline nearly 11 years, and she had only seen that level of clearance attached to 3 passengers before. Corporate board members. Government transportation officials. People whose names never appeared in ordinary reservation systems. Her mouth suddenly felt dry. Around her, the terminal remained eerily quiet. Passengers sensed the shift instantly, even though most of them could not see the monitor itself. Human beings always recognized the moment confidence collapsed. Ethan stared at Brittany nervously. "What does that mean?" he whispered. Brittany swallowed hard before answering. "It means..." She stopped mid-sentence because she did not know how to finish it without exposing exactly how badly she had misjudged the situation. Naomi Whitaker remained standing beside her suitcase, calm and composed beneath the bright terminal lights. She did not smirk. She did not look triumphant. Somehow that made everything worse. Brittany forced herself to straighten her posture again. "There appears to have been some misunderstanding," she said carefully. A few passengers exchanged glances immediately. The businessman with the espresso lowered his eyes toward the floor. The woman near the charging station slowly crossed her arms, embarrassment spreading across her face as she replayed the humiliation she had silently watched unfold. Naomi tilted her head slightly. A misunderstanding? Brittany nodded too quickly. Yes, perhaps there was confusion regarding your account profile. Naomi's expression remained unreadable. Interesting, she said softly. Because 10 minutes ago you seemed very certain. The words hit harder than any public accusation could have. Brittany felt heat flood her cheeks again. One of the security officers quietly stepped backward, clearly realizing they never should have been involved in the first place. The younger officer adjusted his belt awkwardly while avoiding eye contact with Naomi entirely. Then suddenly, the airline supervisor behind the counter received another notification. His face paled instantly. Brittany, he whispered urgently. You need to answer this call. Brittany looked down toward the desk phone flashing repeatedly beside the monitor. Internal executive line. Her stomach tightened. Slowly, she picked up the receiver. This is Brittany Cole at Gate B12. The voice on the other end was calm, but dangerously controlled. Why is Naomi Whitaker being delayed from boarding? Brittany froze. Several nearby employees immediately recognized the voice coming faintly through the receiver speaker. Martin Ellison, Regional Operations Director for the airline's entire Midwest division. Brittany's pulse began hammering in her ears. Sir, I was only attempting to verify. Verify what exactly? Martin interrupted coldly. Her valid ticket? Her executive clearance? Or whether someone dressed simply deserves respect? Brittany's face drained of color. Ethan slowly looked away, pretending to focus on the counter computer while nearby passengers watched in complete silence now. Nobody was recording anymore. Nobody was laughing. The mood had changed entirely. Brittany glanced toward Naomi, who remained perfectly still beside the boarding lane. I did not realize who she was, Brittany said weakly. The response came immediately. That is precisely the problem. A hush fell across the terminal after those words. Even the rain tapping softly against the giant airport windows seemed louder somehow. Martin continued. Naomi Whitaker is personally leading tomorrow morning's acquisition review involving this airline's restructuring partnership. She requested anonymous travel specifically to evaluate customer treatment standards without executive interference. Brittany's knees nearly gave out beneath her. Around the gate, several passengers exchanged stunned looks as pieces finally connected in their minds. The woman in the cardigan. The silence. The confidence. The refusal to leave. Naomi had not been standing there because she was stubborn. She had been standing there because she belonged there all along. Brittany gripped the phone tighter with trembling fingers. Sir, I can explain. No, Martin replied quietly. You already did. Then the line went dead. The room remained completely silent afterward. Brittany slowly lowered the receiver while her reflection stared back at her from the dark computer screen. For the first time that evening, she truly saw herself clearly. And standing only a few feet away, Naomi Whitaker watched her with calm eyes that carried no anger at all. Somehow, that made the shame unbearable. The silence hanging over Gate B12 no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt heavy, final, like the entire terminal had suddenly become aware that something irreversible had happened. Brittany Cole stood frozen behind the boarding counter with the dead phone still resting loosely in her hand, while passengers avoided looking directly at her. Only minutes earlier, she had controlled the space completely. Her voice had carried authority. People had followed her lead without question. But now that same crowd stared at her with something far worse than anger. Disappointment. Naomi Whitaker calmly closed her silver laptop and slid it back into her carry-on bag. Her movements remained slow and measured, untouched by the chaos surrounding her. One of the security officers quietly cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said carefully to Naomi. I apologize for the misunderstanding. Naomi looked at him with gentle eyes. You were doing your job. The officer nodded once, visibly relieved by her response, though the shame on his face remained. Nearby, Ethan shifted awkwardly behind the counter before finally speaking up. Miss Whitaker, he said softly, your boarding is ready whenever you are. Naomi glanced briefly toward the jet bridge in trance, but did not move yet. Brittany noticed. Everyone noticed. The terminal seemed to hold its breath again. Brittany slowly stepped out from behind the counter, her polished confidence completely gone now. Up close, the strain in her expression was impossible to hide. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Miss Whitaker, she began quietly, I owe you an apology. Naomi remained silent. Brittany swallowed hard before continuing. I made assumptions about you based on your appearance, and I handled this situation completely wrong. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. The businessman who had laughed earlier lowered his eyes toward the marble floor. A young woman sitting near the window crossed her arms tightly. Clearly ashamed, she had watched everything happen without saying a word. The social pressure in the terminal had reversed completely now. Brittany took another shaky breath. I embarrassed you publicly, and there is no excuse for that. Naomi studied her for several long seconds. Not angrily, not triumphantly, just thoughtfully. Then she finally spoke. Do you know what the dangerous part was? Brittany blinked uncertainly. Naomi's voice remained calm enough that nearby passengers leaned in to hear. It was not that you thought I did not belong here. She glanced slowly around the terminal. It was how quickly everyone else believed you. A hush fell across the gate again. The words landed softly, but their weight settled over everyone listening. The businessman tightened his grip on his coffee cup. The teenager who had recorded earlier quietly slipped his phone into his pocket. Even the airport employees standing nearby looked visibly uncomfortable now. Naomi continued. Most people do not question humiliation when it is delivered by someone wearing authority. Brittany's eyes filled with tears she clearly did not want anyone to see. You are right, she whispered. Naomi tilted her head. Slightly. You saw clothes, shoes, a suitcase, and you decided who deserved respect before I ever spoke. Brittany looked down immediately. Naomi's voice never rose. If I had actually been an ordinary passenger with no connections, would this apology still be happening? Nobody answered. The room went completely silent. Because everyone knew the truth. Brittany pressed her lips together tightly, struggling to hold herself together. No, she admitted quietly. Naomi nodded once, not cruelly, simply acknowledging honesty when it finally appeared. Then she reached down and lifted her suitcase handle. Luxury is not a seat, she said softly. It is how people are treated when they appear to offer you nothing. The words seemed to echo through the terminal long after she finished speaking. Brittany stood motionless, unable to look away as Naomi finally stepped toward the boarding lane. No applause followed her. No dramatic music. No triumphant celebration. Just silence. Pure silence. The kind that only arrives when people are forced to confront the worst version of themselves. As Naomi disappeared down the jet bridge beneath the soft airport lights, nobody at Gate B12 would ever forget the woman in the gray cardigan who quietly revealed how little dignity costs and how many people fail to give it freely. Inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere felt completely different from the chaos Naomi Whitaker had left behind at Gate B12. Soft amber lighting glowed across polished armrests and wide leather seats while flight attendants moved quietly through the aisle offering bottled water and warm towels to boarding passengers. Yet even there, whispers had already started spreading. Airports had their own invisible communication system. Employees talked. Passengers shared stories. By the time Naomi stepped onto the aircraft, several flight attendants already recognized her name. A tall attendant with silver earrings immediately straightened when she saw the boarding manifest on her tablet. Miss Whitaker, she said carefully, welcome aboard. Naomi offered a polite nod and moved toward seat 2A near the front window. Her carry-on suitcase rolled softly across the carpeted aisle while nearby passengers subtly watched her pass. Some recognized her face now after searching her name online. Others only sensed the unusual respect suddenly surrounding her. Naomi settled quietly into her seat and placed her cardigan neatly beside her before gazing out at the rain streaking across the runway lights beyond the window. The cabin remained calm, but the terminal outside was unraveling. Back at Gate B12, Brittany Cole sat alone behind the boarding counter while the last economy passengers filed silently through the boarding lane. Nobody looked at her the same way anymore. The authority she once carried so confidently now felt fragile and artificial. Ethan quietly processed boarding scans without speaking. Even the security officers had left without another word. Brittany stared blankly at the dark monitor in front of her, replaying Naomi's final sentence again and again inside her head. Luxury is not a seat. It is how people are treated when they appear to offer you nothing. For the first time in years, Brittany began questioning the person she had become. Her obsession with appearances had not happened overnight. It had grown slowly through years of working around wealthy travelers, celebrity clients, and executive passengers who treated airline staff differently depending on status and presentation. Somewhere along the way, Brittany had started believing the same thing they did. That expensive clothes meant importance. That confidence came from visible wealth. That ordinary people deserved less patience, less dignity, less kindness. And now that belief had collapsed publicly in front of an entire terminal. Her phone suddenly vibrated against the counter. Internal Human Resources notification. Mandatory review meeting scheduled. Brittany's stomach tightened immediately. Across the gate area, two younger employees whispered quietly to one another before falling silent when Brittany glanced toward them. She could feel the judgment around her now. Not cruel judgment. Worse, disappointed judgment. The kind that arrives after people witness someone fail a test of character. Meanwhile, inside the aircraft, Naomi calmly reviewed documents on her laptop while passengers settled into their seats. A middle-aged man across the aisle leaned toward her carefully. "Excuse me," he said awkwardly. Naomi looked up. "Yes." The man cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I was standing near the gate earlier." Naomi said nothing. "I just wanted to say," he hesitated. "I should have spoken up." The cabin fell quiet around them. Naomi studied him gently before offering a small nod. "Most people stay quiet," she answered softly. "That is how humiliation survives in public." The man lowered his eyes immediately, ashamed by how accurate the statement felt. A younger woman seated behind Naomi suddenly spoke up as well. "I recorded part of what happened," she admitted quietly. "At first I thought it was entertaining." Naomi closed her laptop slowly. "And afterward?" The woman swallowed hard. "Afterward, I realized how quickly people enjoy watching someone be treated badly when they think that person has no power." Naomi's eyes softened slightly. That realization matters. The aircraft cabin remained silent after that. Not awkward silence. Reflective silence. The kind that forces people inward. Outside the window, runway lights blurred softly beneath the falling rain while baggage crews moved through the darkness below. Then the captain's voice finally echoed through the cabin speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with us this evening." Naomi leaned back quietly in seat 2A while the aircraft prepared for departure. Around her sat wealthy executives, frequent travelers, and passengers accustomed to comfort and status. But only one person on that plane truly understood how fragile respect becomes when it depends entirely on appearances. The flight to Chicago lasted just under 2 hours, but Naomi Whitaker spent most of it in thoughtful silence. The soft hum of the aircraft engines filled the cabin while city lights drifted beneath the clouds far below. Around her, first-class passengers quietly sipped wine, reviewed presentations, or slept beneath folded blankets, unaware that the woman sitting near the window had just exposed a truth far larger than an airline incident. Naomi closed the final document on her laptop shortly before landing and gazed out at the dark skyline appearing in the distance. She had spent nearly 20 years building Whitaker Aviation Logistics from a struggling regional software startup into one of the most influential transportation technology firms in the country. Yet despite the billions attached to her company's name, she still preferred simple clothes, ordinary hotels, and traveling without entourages or executive treatment whenever possible. Not because she disliked wealth, but because anonymity revealed people honestly. The aircraft touched down smoothly at O'Hare International Airport just after 9:30 that evening. As passengers stood and gathered their belongings, several glanced toward Naomi with expressions very different from the ones they carried earlier. Respect had replaced judgment now, but Naomi understood something most people never learned. Respect that arrives only after power is revealed is not true respect at all. As she stepped into the jet bridge, a tall man in a charcoal overcoat was already waiting near the terminal entrance. Daniel Mercer, Chief Operations Chairman for the Airline Partnership Board, walked toward her quickly with visible concern across his face. "Naomi," he said quietly, "I am deeply sorry for what happened tonight." Naomi offered a polite nod. "Good evening, Daniel." He looked genuinely shaken. "Martin called me immediately after the incident. Human Resources has already suspended Brittany Cole pending review." Naomi stopped walking. The busy airport corridor flowed around them while travelers hurried toward baggage claim and connecting flights beneath bright overhead lights. "Suspended?" she repeated calmly. Daniel hesitated. After what happened at the gate, there was pressure to act quickly. Naomi remained silent for a few moments. Then she spoke softly enough that Daniel had to lean closer to hear. Did Brittany fail tonight? Daniel blinked uncertainly. Of course she did. Naomi shook her head gently. No. She revealed a failure that already existed. Daniel frowned slightly. Naomi continued walking through the terminal, while polished floors reflected the passing airport lights beneath their feet. If your company culture teaches employees that expensive appearance equals importance, eventually someone like Brittany becomes inevitable. Daniel exhaled slowly, realizing she was right. You still want to proceed with tomorrow's partnership meeting? Naomi looked toward him calmly. Do you know why I travel anonymously? Daniel shook his head. Because customer service reports mean nothing if employees only behave properly when executives are watching. The words settled heavily between them. They passed a large glass wall overlooking the rain-covered runway where planes moved slowly through the darkness, like glowing machines crossing an ocean of lights. Daniel lowered his voice carefully. Many people at the gate are saying you handled the situation with remarkable grace. Naomi's expression softened slightly. Grace is easy when you already have power. Daniel looked at her curiously. Then what is difficult? Naomi stopped beside the window. Treating powerless people with dignity when nobody is forcing you to. The airport noise around them suddenly felt distant. Daniel stared quietly at the woman beside him, realizing why investors trusted her with billion-dollar negotiations while employees spoke about her with unusual loyalty. Naomi Whitaker understood something most executives never did. Character was not revealed through authority. It was revealed through restraint. Her phone vibrated softly inside her cardigan pocket. A message from Martin Ellison appeared on the screen. Terminal staff are requesting guidance regarding Brittany Cole. Naomi stared at the message for several long seconds before typing a short response. Mandatory retraining, not termination. Daniel looked surprised. After everything she did, Naomi slid the phone back into her pocket. Humiliation taught her enough for one night. The rain continued tapping softly against the giant airport windows while travelers hurried past them without realizing they were walking beside the woman who had quietly changed the future of an airline without ever raising her voice. The executive conference room overlooking downtown Chicago was wrapped in quiet tension the following morning. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed gray clouds drifting above the city skyline, while senior airline executives sat around a polished walnut table reviewing financial projections displayed across massive digital screens. Every seat in the room was occupied except one. At precisely 8:35, the glass doors opened softly, and Naomi Whitaker stepped inside wearing the same gray cardigan she had worn the night before. The room immediately fell silent. Several board members straightened in their seats while others exchanged uneasy glances, already aware of what had happened at Gate B12. Daniel Mercer rose first. Good morning, everyone, he said carefully. Before we begin, I would like to formally welcome Naomi Whitaker, founder and chief executive officer of Whitaker Aviation Logistics. A low ripple moved through the room. Some executives had expected a billionaire in designer clothing surrounded by assistants and legal advisors. Instead, they saw the same calm woman who could have easily been mistaken for an ordinary traveler in any airport terminal in America. Naomi took her seat quietly at the center of the table. Thank you for having me, she said gently. Her voice carried no arrogance, no resentment, no need to remind anyone of her power. Somehow, that made her presence even more commanding. Across the table, a silver-haired executive cleared his throat awkwardly. Miss Whitaker, he began, I want to personally apologize on behalf of the airline for the unacceptable treatment you experienced. Naomi folded her hands calmly. I appreciate that. Another executive leaned forward carefully. We were informed that you requested Brittany Cole not be terminated. Naomi nodded once. Correct. The room exchanged surprised looks. May I ask why? The executive continued. Naomi's eyes moved slowly across the table. Because firing one employee does not solve a cultural problem. Silence settled across the room again. Outside the windows, rain streaked softly against the glass while distant traffic moved far below through the city streets. Naomi continued quietly. The issue was not one gate agent making assumptions. The issue was how naturally everyone around her accepted those assumptions. Several executives lowered their eyes toward the table. Naomi reached into her bag and removed a small folder. Last night, more than 30 passengers witnessed public humiliation and said nothing until they realized I held power. She slid several printed photographs across the table. Security images from the gate area. Faces watching silently. Phones raised. Employees standing still. That, Naomi said softly, is the real problem. No one interrupted her. People often believe discrimination only exists when someone openly insults another person, she continued. But more often, it exists in silence. In assumptions. In deciding who deserves patience based on appearance. The room remained completely still now. One executive quietly removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead, visibly ashamed. Naomi's voice never rose. I built my company on a simple principle. Every person deserves dignity before they prove their value, not after. Daniel Mercer stared at her thoughtfully. And if they fail to give it? Naomi looked toward the rain outside the windows for a moment. Then they should be taught, not destroyed. The words settled deeply over everyone listening. After the meeting ended 2 hours later, executives quietly filed out of the conference room with expressions far different from the ones they carried walking in. Financial partnerships had been discussed. Contracts had been signed. Billion-dollar negotiations had moved forward. But strangely, none of those things felt like the most important event of the morning. As Naomi gathered her papers calmly into her bag, Daniel approached her once more. You changed this company today, he said quietly. Naomi gave a small smile. No, she answered softly. People change only when they choose to see clearly. She walked toward the elevator alone a few moments later, her simple sneakers crossing the polished floor with soft echoes that disappeared into the silence behind her. And somewhere back in Terminal B, Brittany Cole sat inside a mandatory training seminar, watching security footage from the night before with tears quietly forming in her eyes. Not because she lost authority, not because she faced discipline, but because for the first time in many years, she finally understood the difference between recognizing wealth and recognizing humanity. And that day, everyone who witnessed Naomi Whitaker remembered something the modern world too often forgets. Real class has never been about seats, status, or appearance. It has always been about how we treat people when we believe they have nothing to offer us in return.